What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. FantasyTeamAdvisors.com bringing home the bacon NFL DFS video for Week 6 top stacks that we've got going. So you guys liked the video last week. We chopped it up. You guys had questions. We've answered them. If you have other questions about stacks, anything like that, the Discord is down below. Also, we have a giveaway every single one of these videos as long as you are part of the family. So what does that mean? You've got to like this video. You've got to be a YouTube subscriber. And you got to leave a comment on this video to have a chance for the comment picker to pick you up. If this video gets at least 50 likes, you'll have a chance at a free week of FTA+. That is a week of MLB, NASCAR, PGA, NFL, MMA, NBA in a couple of weeks. If this video gets 100 likes, you have a chance at a free month. 150 likes, a chance at a $200 free year. 200 or more likes, a chance at a lifetime pass. Super simple and super easy. So what we're going to do is we're using a ton of our information, a ton of our sources. We've got our matchup tool that we're going to go over. We're using Vegas odds. We are using our snap counts. We are using the red zone stats. We are using all of them to build these stacks. So we have 5 stacks we're going to go over. We're going to use DraftKings just to look at some of the information. We're going to give you this. What our matchup tool has is, if you're unaware of what it has, I will show it on the screen real quick for the quarterbacks. But as you can see, it has, these are the defenses that you want to go against. So these are the defenses. Depending on if you play on Fanduel or DraftKings, I have sorted it out here. You can see then it coincides to which offensive player you want to play. For example, this is the quarterbacks, or these are all of the quarterbacks. These are the fantasy points per game, the fantasy points QB rank for DraftKings, QB rank for FanDuel that they are. It's also got the quarterbacks, the quarterback rankings, and all of the stats for this year so far. So we're using that as a part of a springboard, and we are using all of that information to build these stacks out. Now, sometimes you want to go, 2 stack, 2 to 3, depending on the game script and depending on all of that. So we're going to break that down as well. So if you guys like this, please share it. Please click on the ads. Those help. Comment for the algorithm, and we're going to get started. So, as always, these videos are sponsored by Outlier.bet. You can sign up down below. They have 2 packages. One is the normal package, $30 for the or $20 for the month. You can check it out. You're going to get a 7-day free trial, and then $20 will get you a month access. If you sign up using our link, send us an email, dfshelp1@gmail.com, or use the contact form on the website, and we'll give you a free week or a free month of FTA+, which is a $30 value. If you sign up for their pro package, we're going to give you a 3-month promo from us, which is a $90 value. So check it out. You can see they've got different trends. If you want to see the different props, we've already gone over that in the Thursday Night Football video that we put out the other day. We will do that for other videos as well. So make sure you check out Outlier. Make sure you check out FantasyTeamAdvisors.com, and let's bring home some bacon. So what we're going to do is we're going to go from the top 5 stacks. We're going to go number 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stuff like that. So hopefully you guys, if you're watching this in Reels, or if you're watching this on TikTok, or if you're watching this on YouTube Shorts, the YouTube channel is Fantasy Team Advisors. You can check us out, FTAsports, and the full video is a breakdown of all of this. So starting at number 5 for the stacks that we like the Green Bay Packers versus the Arizona Cardinals. Over-under currently, as of the making of this video, is 47.5. So in that stack, I am looking at Jordan Love. So Jordan Love obviously had a huge game against Minnesota. Then we went with the bounce back, or we went with the bring it back last week against the Rams. Did not do as well. Had 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Did have 10 rushing yards. Basically half the points of what he had, little over half, little less than half of the points he had in that game. But I do like him here. Obviously, Dobbs should be back in this game. So if we are stacking Jordan Love, Jaden Reed is his number 1. Jordan Love is the number 24 quarterback ranked so far this year. Jaden Reed is the number 5 wide receiver this year. Overall, I mean, huge game against Minnesota, down game here against the Rams. Still getting targeted 5 times a game. If he can bring that up, you can see he's getting 70 yards last game. No touchdowns. So Jaden Reed makes a lot of sense. So he's the number one, obviously the number one target, the number 5 overall wide receiver. You could also look at this against Josh Jacobs. You could look at Josh Jacobs, and we can see that for the running back situation, Arizona ranks 24th on DraftKings, giving up an average of 26.6 fantasy points per game to the opposing running backs here. So Josh Jacobs is the number 24 ranked running back this season so far. Obviously, didn't do anything against Minnesota. They were throwing the ball a ton, playing from behind. If this game can be competitive and Kyler can step up, Josh Jacobs, and it's not a blowout, and they're not playing from behind, Josh Jacobs could see a little boost in what we saw. So 24th ranked against the opposing running backs. Arizona's defense is not that good. So I do like those three. So Jordan, Jaden, and Josh. Didn't even realize they're all J's. But here's the bring back. So what is the bring back? If you think Green Bay is going to do well and you think they're going to go up big, Arizona has to claw their way back. So they're the 5th highest over-under as of now. So obviously that would probably mean Marvin Harrison Jr. is involved somehow. So we're looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. He's the number 18th wide receiver so far this year. Down game against San Francisco. Only 7 targets, only 2 receptions in those. Only 36 yards. That's the thing. They're going to see that against the Rams, they won 41-10. He had 130 yards. Against Detroit, he had 64 yards and 17.4. Against Washington, they were playing from behind. They obviously pulled him, 15.5. Against San Francisco, in a game where they won it on a walk-off kickoff, it was a 1-point game. He only had 2 receptions. If they want to win, if they want to stay competitive or try to beat as much as they can, they know they have to get him the ball. I think that brings it back here. So you've obviously you've got Marvin Harrison there. James Conner's the other one. So if the game is close, James Conner is ranked 10th overall. And if we look at how how Green Bay stacks up against the run, Green Bay is ranked 20th. They give up an average of 24 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. So we look at this. San Francisco, they're a very good defense team here. They obviously, he didn't do as much. Still had 86 yards on 19 attempts. You can see his attempts are there. As long as the game stays close, his attempts are going to be there. So this is just sort of a bring back. So then you're averaging 3,900 the rest of the way, whether or not you throw in a defense that's a low defense and you go from there. That is how we go. So that is our number 5 stack for week 6. Moving up the ladder to number 4. In this game, we've got Cincinnati versus the Giants. We've got Joe Burrow versus Daniel Jones. We've got Joe Burrow as our number 4 stack. So we look at Burrow. We know what he's bringing to the table. They're not winning the games as much, but I mean, he put up 37.78 last time, 39 attempts in the air, 30 completions, almost 400 yards, 5 touchdowns in that game, and he still lost that game. The Giants defense, both of these defenses have not been ideal. I still think Joe Burrow is where we're looking at. Joe Burrow ranks as the number 4 overall quarterback through the first 5 weeks. He's obviously got to throw to the number 1 wide receiver through the first 5 weeks, Jamar Chase. So everyone was on T. Higgins. He scored a touchdown early, but Jamar had 10 of 12, 193 yards, 2 tutties. He's got 2 games with 2 tutties. His touchdowns have come in the last 3 games. All 5 of them have come there. Obviously, he's very expensive, but he's the number 1 target there. He's the number 1 wide receiver this year for a reason. The other one that might take out some of the exposure, T. Higgins. A huge game against Baltimore. 14 targets, 9 receptions, 83 yards. He had 2 touchdowns as well. So a lot of these points came from both of these. So if the game stays relatively close or if it's a shootout somehow, we could get a ton of points out of them, just these 3 right here. Now, obviously, the running back situation. Now, stacking, you can do a quarterback plus 1. You could do a quarterback plus 2. You could do a quarterback plus 3, but it is not necessarily one that's not a direction I'm going to be going in. But you still look at this. It's obviously it's a Sunday Night Football game. You can't play it as the main slate on DraftKings, but you can on FanDuel. It's very weird. FanDuel does the Sunday Night Football game within this. So you can use this information for FanDuel as well. We just do it on DraftKings. But Obviously, the pricing's a little bit different. So if you did want to look at Chase Brown, now I said last week Zach Moss is RB1, but Moss in that game, 24 yards last week, 8.2 fantasy points. I know that he had a questionable tag, but I was all over Brown over him. 46 yards, 3 receptions. He had 16.4. He also had a receiving touchdown as well. So he was cheap. They bumped him up 500. So I don't mind if you put Chase Brown in there if you don't want to maybe go with T. Higgins, but I think you have to have Jamar Chase in this situation. So now we have to look at the bring back, meaning if it's a high-scoring game, which Giants players are going to make sense. Obviously, Malik Neighbors, if he's in there. Now, he was out last game. He's questionable here. He had a concussion. He has not practiced since then. Kind of just looking at this news. So, yeah. Looking at this. Okay, so he does look like he's trending in the wrong direction. So, obviously, if Neighbors is in, I like him. Okay, but if Neighbors is out, that is Wan'Dale Robinson territory for me right here. You can see he's trended up. He's done well in these games. 6 of 9 targets for 36 yards against Seattle. Did have a touchdown there. Also getting a little bit of the rushing there as well. So 6,100, he makes sense, a lot of sense if Malik Neighbors is out. I think that is a huge value for us if we're there. Tracy Jr. is another one. Now, he had a huge day last time, 129. This is if Singletary's out. If Singletary's in, Tracy's probably out for me. But if you want to get 2 players in and you think this game's going to be competitive and close, this is a stack here where you're still averaging 4,100 for the rest of a running back, a tight end, a flex, and a defense. If you want to punt any sort of defense here, then let's just, for instance, we will punt and say the Browns defense against Philly, average 4,600 the rest of the way. So that is right there, our number 4 stack for week 6. Moving to our number 3 stack. This guy is the number 1 quarterback of all of the NFL through the first 5 weeks. Lamar Jackson, huge day. Threw the ball. Now, people say he doesn't throw the ball. He's a running back. He threw the ball 42 times against Cincinnati. 26 completions, 348 yards, 4 tutties. He had 55 yards on the ground. Did have fumble twice, and he lost it. So, fumble prone is there. But him against this Washington defense, we look at Washington against the quarterback. They rank 24th against the opposing quarterback, giving up an average of 19.2 fantasy points on DraftKings, 19 fantasy points on Fanduel. So he obviously threw the ball a ton last week. If this game stays close and competitive with Jaden Daniels, and I think it can, we could be in store for some fireworks here. So obviously, Derrick Henry was held back. I say held back. Still had 15 attempts last week, 92 yards, had a touchdown. A huge, the 51-yard to basically set up the win there was huge. Kind of a down, he was really down up until that huge run there. Washington against the run. Looking at the Nats, the Commanders, they rank 17th, giving up an average of 23.3 fantasy points. But Derrick Henry is not a normal running back, as we know. So Derrick Henry, you could stack Derrick Henry with him, and I'd feel okay with that. Or we go with the wide receiver. So Derrick Henry's ranked the 2nd running back overall this year, and that makes sense. Kamara is number 1 after that huge game in week 2, I believe it was. So Derrick Henry's the number 1 or the number 2 running back. Lamar Jackson is the number 1 quarterback there. But let's say he's not going to throw it to Derrick. He's going to throw it to probably Zay Flowers. We look at Zay Flowers. He comes in. He is the number 29th wide receiver this year. Huge game last week. 12 targets, 111 yards, a little bit of run. Didn't have any touchdowns, but had 22 fantasy points, as opposed to the week before against Buffalo where they were up big, 2 fantasy points. Dallas, 5.3. They kind of saw, let's get him involved a little bit more. Let's get him those targets. I think we can be throwing it back and forth. As long as Jaden Daniels can keep up with Lamar, I think Zay Flowers is one of those guys that hopefully is involved a little bit more. Or if you want to pivot and go a little bit lower and he's in, I don't know, he's questionable right now. Did not practice Wednesday, does have a groin injury. His typical role, 8 targets last week, 58 yards and a touchdown, had 15.8. If we kind of wait to see the news, I'm probably more on the Zay Flowers train, but if you want to pay down at 4,100 and he is good to go to play, I'm okay with Bateman. The problem is a groin is obviously a muscle you got to use when you're running. I'm scared about that. So I'm giving this option, but I am for 100% am going to pair up Zay Flowers and Lamar. Personally, unless I make multiple different lineups, I am probably not on Bateman. But on the flip side of that, we are looking at the other side, which is Washington, which is whether or not we can't go Jaden Daniels. We can bring it back with McLaren. We can bring it back with Ertz. We could even bring it back with Brian Robinson. So let's take a look at those. F1 McLaren here. Game logs. 8 targets last week, 112 yards. The week before that, 10 targets, 52 yards. He has 2 tutties on the year, 303 yards here. McLaren is ranked the 24th wide receiver this year. He makes a lot of sense in a game that I think they're going to be passing a ton. So if we look at Baltimore, how they stack up against the run or the wide receiver, Baltimore's ranked 29th against opposing wide receivers. They give up an average of 46 fantasy points on DraftKings. That's McLaren, okay? He's the number one. You could also pay down an Olamide Zacchaeus, 3,500. Hasn't really been involved, though. That's the problem. You could also go down. They've got so many different options to feed. De'Ami Brown, 4,000. Last week, 57 yards, 2 of 2 targets, had a touchdown. So his game was saved. He is 4,000, so he's a little bit cheaper. Obviously, we know that Daniels likes to run, but he also has Noah Brown. Questionable tag out of Noah. Let's see if it's updated. He does also have a groin injury. 4 targets, did not play in week 5, so we will see if he's good to go in this one. And then we've always got the LMC. Instead of CMC, his brother LMC. 3,700. Game log, 3 targets last week, 19 yards. Didn't really do much. So if I'm looking at this, I'm probably staying away from McCaffrey, Brown, and De'Ami. Zacchaeus probably as well. I am looking at Zach Ertz. So if we look at Zach Ertz, overall, Zach Ertz is the number 16 tight end this year so far. Didn't really do much last week. Had 8 targets, only 2 receptions for 10 yards. Not ideal. He has not have a touchdown this year, but this could be one of those games where not many people are going to be on him. He was, 57% of offensive snaps is what he was on. So if we're looking at tight ends for them, is it Ertz? He's got the most here. Fantasy points per game is 7 as an average. You got John Bates. He hasn't done anything, didn't do anything last week. That's the problem. Jaden Daniels, it might come down to his running back. So Brian Robinson Jr. Did not practice Wednesday. Does have a knee problem, but look at that. He has not missed a week yet. He had 18 yards last week, which is not enough. The week before that, though, 21 attempts for 101 yards. So we look at that. That makes sense. You could also pay down for Jeremy Nichols. If Robinson's hurt, if Eckler's not 100%, you can see Jeremy Nichols here. 68 yards the week before, 44 yards last week. His longest has been 27 and 28. He has 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games. Those are good. Those are good numbers. A cheap option at running back at 4,500 if you think this game's going to stay close and you need to have that bring back for this game here anyway. And then if we're just capping it off, looking at Eckler, limited fashion Wednesday, heel injury. Played last week, had 67 yards, and had some targets and receptions. So he is there as well. 5,600 is not bad. So if you want to go him, if Robinson is out, obviously Eckler bumps up. And then McNichols is still there as a cheap running back option there. So that completes our number 3 stack and the bring back there. So now we're going to move to our second overall stack. Stack 2, which is Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions versus the Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott. So I love this matchup here. It's got the highest over-under at 52 right now. So we look at this. Jared Goff, obviously they're coming off the bye. They're well-rested, which might be key, maybe not. We'll see. Obviously, Dallas playing. So we look at this. So we look at Detroit. Jared Goff. We know that battle between him and Seattle in week 4. He went 18 for 18. 100% completion, 292 yards, 2 touchdowns, 155.8 QB rating, 27.81 or 1.8. They did not move him up. For whatever reason, DraftKings did not move his salary up. And we look at how Dallas stacks. Now, Dallas's defense looks very different than last week. So the defense is completely different than what we were used to last year overall. So we look at the Dallas Cowboys. They rank number 19 against opposing quarterbacks, giving up an average of 18.3 fantasy points per game on DraftKings, which I think Jared Goff, especially if they're playing from behind somehow, if Detroit's defense is playing from behind, Goff is going to have to throw it. And you can see in week 2, he threw it 55 times. So he is not opposed to throwing it that many times. 307 yards, but he had the 2 interceptions and no touchdowns, which was a weird game for him. So I still have Jared Goff coming off the bye. They've had time to rest, re-energize, and watch the tape on this terrible, terrible Dallas D. So obviously, who's he going to throw it to? Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to be the most expensive, coming off. So after week 1 where he did nothing and everyone was like, what's going on with him? All he's done was put up 100 yards or put up a touchdown in every single game. 20-plus fantasy points in every single game there. Gets to go up against Dallas. Now, Amon-Ra St. Brown is the number 20 wide receiver currently this year. And then we look at Dallas's D against the and you can see all of this in our matchup tool, which is part of FTA Plus. But Dallas D against the wide receiver, they do rank 9th. So they're pretty good against wide receiver, but they've got a lot of injuries there. They still give up an average of 29 fantasy points per game to the opposing wide receiver. So you can go Amon-Ra St. Brown as 1, or we can go Jameson Williams. 80 yards. He had 2 receptions on only 2 targets in week 4, but he went for 80 yards because his longest run was 70. Had a touchdown in that one, had 16 fantasy points. Obviously had a down week against Arizona, which didn't make sense to me. But against Tampa Bay, had 79 yards. And Rams, week 1, we all remember that. 121 yards, 1 touchdown, 27.4 fantasy points. So if you don't want to pay up for Amon-Ra, you can go Jameson Williams, and you can go in that direction. So again, not necessarily all of these. Just maybe you want QB plus 1 or QB plus 2. But the problem is with this defense, or this offense, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery are both in play for running backs for a stack here. So we look at that. Jahmyr Gibbs is the number 14 running back. David Montgomery is the number 16th ranked running back. So they're very close. You can see they both average right around the same fantasy points per game. You will save a little bit of salary here with Montgomery. 40 yards there, 105 yards there. He's had a touchdown in every single game this year. So David Montgomery, you will save $500, has had a touchdown every single game. Jahmyr Gibbs, 2 touchdowns against Seattle, 78 yards, 19.8. He's put up over 15 fantasy points every single week, has not scored, but the thing is, both of these running backs can score as well. So I'm not saying to do all of these, but if you want, let's say we go take Amon-Ra and we take David Montgomery. So now you're averaging 4,800 the rest of the way. You've got Goff, Montgomery, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. We've got to get the flip side. We are looking at Dallas as the bringback. So obviously, Dallas, wide receivers. Their running back situation's disgusting. If we look at their running backs, so Dallas's running backs, let's see. Detroit is ranked the 3rd. So Detroit is ranked 3rd overall against the run. They're only giving up an average of 17.6. And we look at these Cowboys. So Rico Dowdle, number 28th ranked running back this year. Zeke, 54th. Lukey, 63. Deuce Vaughn, 86. They have not been good against the run. They have the worst matchup on paper this entire week for running back. So the running back for me for Dallas, completely out. I'm looking at CeeDee Lamb. I'm looking at Jake Ferguson. That is where I'd go. So CeeDee Lamb overall is ranked 13th wide receiver this year. 9 targets last week. 8 targets against the Giants for 98 yards. He's got 2 touchdowns this year, averaging right around 15.5 fantasy points per game. I think he's got to be in here. I think he's going to be involved in this offense completely. Then we get to the tight end, Jake Ferguson. We've got Fergie here, 22 receptions on the year, 70 yards last week, 13 fantasy points. In week 4, 49. Week 3, 95. Missed week 2, thought he tore his ACL, but he did not. Ever since coming back, he's just put up double-digit fantasy points every single time. So I'm looking at this as a game stack here. So I'm looking at Goff, taking it to Montgomery and to Amon-Ra. Then on the bring back, I'm looking at CeeDee Lamb and Ferguson. I want absolutely nothing to do with the defense here. I want nothing to do with any of the running backs for Dallas at all. And that is the number 2. And now number 1, it's probably pretty self-explanatory. It's the same game. It's the bring back, but we're bringing it as the top stack for the week. The Dallas Cowboys, Dak Prescott, 52 over/under. I think we can have some fun with this one. So we're looking at Dallas. So Dak, number 1, number 9 quarterback for the year. You can see he's putting the ball up a ton. 42 attempts last week, 352 yards, 2 touchdowns. Did have 2 interceptions though. Running it a little bit, not a ton. Had 22.38. Down week against the Giants, only attempted to throw it 27 times, but against Baltimore 51 times in a game where Baltimore, it was a high-scoring game, 25-28. They lost that game. They're hungry. They won that game against Pittsburgh last week, but I like Dak Prescott here. Obviously, a little bit messed up because it was it Monday Night Football? Yeah, it was Monday Night Football, and the whole weather delay and all of that. So, looking at that, Dak Prescott as my number 1 quarterback this week for stacking purposes against Detroit. So who's he going to throw to? Obviously, we're looking at CeeDee Lamb because like I said earlier, I do not trust the running back situation. The running backs I want nothing to do with them whatsoever. So get the running backs for Dallas out of your head. Let's look at the passing targets here. CeeDee Lamb, number 1 target for him. He is, like I said, ranked 13th wide receiver. Down week last week, but I'm going to put him in there. If you don't want to pay up for him and you want to go a different direction, obviously Jake Fergie I'm going him. Those are the 2 that I want. But if you want to go a QB plus 3, or you don't want to pay up for CeeDee Lamb and you do want to pay down, obviously Brandon Cooks being on the IL now, or IR, is out for 4 weeks. Justin Tolbert. Overall, or Jalen Tolbert, number 31 wide receiver for the year. Obviously didn't get many targets, but now with Cooks being hurt and then him in that game had 10 targets last week, 87 yards and a tutty. We've got 20 receptions on the year. I think this bumps it up. You're at 5,000 with him. You are a cheap option there. You're saving 3,600 if you don't want to go with Lamb. So let's say we don't go with Lamb. We look at that. We're averaging 5,500 the rest of the way. So Dak to CeeDee. For 100%, Ferguson is in there for me, regardless, in this Cowboy stack or the bring back against the Lions. But if you don't want to pay as much up for CeeDee, I'm okay with Tolbert as well. And then on the bring back, we just talked about this. We're looking at Amon-Ra, Jameson Williams. You could even go down to Tim Patrick if you want to save money. Obviously, the targets really aren't there. He did have 52 yards with the 29th as the longest last week, so people are remembering his name, or in week 5, not in week 4. But that was a crazy game with so much being scored. They were up so big, they were throwing it to Tim Patrick. I don't think he's really going to be involved as much as people might hope or think. Khalif Raymond hasn't done anything. Allen Robinson signed to the practice squad, was of the practice squad, didn't do anything in week 3, didn't play in week 4, so who says he's going to play in week 6? So it's Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams is what we're looking at. So let's bring it back with, let's say, both of them. You're averaging 4,800 the rest of the way. If you don't want to go with that and you do want to go with the run, we can look at the rankings. So if we look at running back, Dallas against the running back, like we already talked about, 27th out of 32. They give up an average of 27.1 on DraftKings. They give up an average of 25.4 on Fanduel. So they're giving up a ton of points to the opposing running backs like we've talked about. So let's say we don't go with Williams. Let's say running back situation, we go with Montgomery. We're still averaging 4,600. Then let's say we go to defense and we want to pay down at defense, but against Philly because they've looked kind of bad, are coming off a bye, but they're still there. We're looking at the Browns. We're still looking at 5,300 the rest of the way. So there are certain ways to go about this week. These are the top 5 stacks that I like. So at number 5, Green Bay Packers. At number 4, Cincinnati. At number 3, we got Baltimore. Number 2, Jared Goff. And number 1, Dallas and Dak Prescott. So make sure you get those stacks in. If you like this video, let us know. If you're excited, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you join the Discord. It's completely free down below. We look forward to having you in that Discord. Ask some questions, find some answers, hopefully. Get some stacks, get some core plays for NFL this week. And don't forget, hit the bell notification so you guys are aware when we go live or when our video goes out for the main slate breakdown, which we have done this week, every single week. So we're going to break down the main slate. We're going to look at it. And we're going to build some lineups using that as well. So that's what I've got in this video. Hopefully it gives you enough time to get some stacks this weekend. Good luck this week. And as always, and let me know your favorite stacks down below. I forgot to say that. Tell us your favorite stacks down below. So good luck. And as always, let's bring home some bacon. Peace.